We are joined here, Brian, by a guy who started out wrestling right here in New England. He then went on to Chikara to join the Devastation Corporation, and most recently was a part of Evolve, one of the most talked about promotions in the country, as one half of the Gatekeepers. But last weekend, seemingly out of nowhere, he made this post on social media. Quote, "As tends to happen in contact sports, cumulative injuries take their toll. I am no different, and it is time to walk away from professional wrestling. To everyone who has supported or helped me along the way, thank you and God bless," unquote. Well, we're going to talk about that announcement and his wrestling career as a whole today here on the Wrestling Podcast About Nothing. So here is the man best known as Flex Rumblecrunch, but known to us as Sean Burke. Hello, Sean.
How are you guys?
Doing all right.
Fantastic. So, Burke, I just want to get this right out of the way, right in the beginning. You couldn't have retired before I had to wrestle you for like 8 months straight?
Well, so that would have been, I would have retired in like year 1 at that point. So, no.
Yeah, your
I
point?
couldn't have.
Come on, I had to bury you. You knew it was coming.
Yeah, of course. That's okay. I'll think of something for you later.
Right out of the gate. Mr. Burke, you talked about cumulative injuries. Now, does this go all the way back to your days? You played college football, right?
Yes, I did. Yeah, Division II at Bentley.
Okay. And so did that have anything to do with what's going on now?
No, actually, I used to, and this kind of sucks for me now. It's probably karma. But I used to kind of brag about through my entire football career. I played football for 15 years, and the worst injury I ever had was a slightly chipped elbow. So I used to kind of brag about how I wasn't injury prone or anything like that. As far as I know, I never had any concussions or anything playing football. And unfortunately, it was indeed wrestling. I don't want to like say that and kind of shine wrestling in a bad light. I just think it's kind of luck of the draw. But the injuries I was talking about there, I kind of purposely left that a little bit vague because I don't know. I guess there's kind of a stigma about concussions, and I didn't really want to become known as a concussion guy, but it indeed was concussions. Over the last couple of years, I've had a few, and I've ended up in the hospital twice on them. Most recently, WrestleMania weekend for Evolve down in Florida. I got kicked in the top of the head, catching a dive, and I went blind. Well, not blind. I lost my vision. Everything was kind of blurry for about 20, 30 minutes. I'd be talking to you. I know there was a person there, but I wouldn't be able to make out who you were in front of me. So they had me, they brought me to the hospital and everything. By the time I got to the hospital, everything was fine. But in talking to doctors kind of, in the next couple of weeks afterward, they kind of strongly advised that it might be time for me to walk away, which kind of a hard decision, given that, I'm fine right now. There's really nothing wrong with me, but it was more risk of future stuff. And there's so little known about it, so that I think the biggest concern I have is certainly, I just had my first child and I want to be able to play 10 years and stuff like that. And, that's the kind of conversations I had with doctors. And, the reality is, who knows, in 6 months, they might come back and say, hey, actually, you know what, we've done some more research and maybe you're not at any risk. And that's where it's really kind of frustrating. But that's what it was. It was concussions.
That's brutal, man. Thanks for sharing that. We definitely want to talk about what looks to be the end of your career, but let's go back to the beginning. So you started wrestling, it was right after college, right?
Yeah, it was. So my initial dream, is probably most kids growing up, is I always wanted to play in the NFL. And the reality was it just wasn't, I was a tight end. I had really, really good hands, and I probably had the right size. I'm just slow. My 40 was not good. So I knew that wasn't going to happen. And I'd always envisioned myself making it to the NFL and then being Kevin Green and having like 2 matches in WWE or something like that. But so always a wrestling fan growing up. In a lot of ways, probably a bigger wrestling fan actually than a football fan in some ways. So it was just kind of natural for me. And, my 40-yard dash doesn't matter in a wrestling ring, but a lot of the other things that I was good at in football, just, lateral quickness and stuff like that, really do kind of translate to what you're doing inside a ring. So it was kind of a natural progression for me.
So I know when I first met you, it was at the EWA, Eastern Wrestling Alliance, Western Massachusetts. I think, Brian, same thing for you, right?
Yeah, I think the first night I met you, I think I was in a match with you. Was it right, Burke? Is this...
You are accurate. I remember it well, actually. The reason I remember that match so vividly is that was probably I was under 10 matches at that point. I don't know exactly what number, but I was real green then. And I remember all night, Heresy and John. I think it was me, Heresy, and Johnny Idol, if I'm correct, against you, Max, and the Mac. Heath Mac.
Right, yeah, that was the match.
And at least Heresy and Idol, I don't know if you or Max were in on it, but were screwing with me all night because we didn't really call much. And at that point, that terrified me, obviously. And they kept, somebody called a Tennessee two-step.
I was just saying the Tennessee two-step.
Yeah. And they wouldn't tell me what it was. And I was supposed to be a key cog in said Tennessee two-step, and they kept kayfabing me on it. And midway through the match, Heresy looks at me and he goes, "I'm just fucking with you. You're not the one doing it." And I remember that vividly because of that. And I just remember being really nervous going into that. And actually, Brian, you and I started the match, I believe, and hadn't called anything. And I got in the ring and I said, "Oh, screw it. I'm going to pretend I'm going to try to press slam him." And I went to Hogan Andre, and you obviously you didn't go anywhere. And I think you pummeled me a little bit and we went from there.
So was there an actual Tennessee two-step?
Yes.
What was it?
I don't know. I didn't see it. So I believe everybody else was in on this. So whatever they did, I was out of the ring when it happened. I think I was brawling with like the Mac or something outside the ring. So I didn't actually see it happen. I still, to this day, don't actually know what a Tennessee two-step is.
I'm right there with you, buddy. I have no clue.
I'm pretty sure you were in on it, weren't you?
No, they kind of just told us they were messing with you, and if you asked us about it, to just go with it.
Gotcha.
The mystery of the Tennessee two-step. If anyone out there that was there involved, maybe a Johnny Idol or something like that, is possibly listening to this, let us know. What is the Tennessee two-step?
I would love to know.
Rocket was acting like he knew, by the way.
No, I haven't a clue either.
It's one of the great mysteries of pro wrestling. I thought everybody knew what that was. This is the first time I've admitted that anybody had no idea what it was.
An exclusive right here.
Yeah. Well, anybody outside of that match, that is. They all knew. But I actually remember, I don't know if it was that show or if it was another. We only had like 3 or 4 shows there. The fire alarm was going off for like an hour before the show, and we didn't think the show was going to happen.
But the match went on, and the Tennessee two-step took place.
As far as I know, yeah.
From what we're told.
There's also a great story here with Max Bauer and Dr. Reginald Hersey, where we're all just. Were you not even present for this argument, Burke?
I might not have been, because it might have been when I was getting ribbed on the two-step.
It wasn't even like, it was just, we were all just kind of standing there talking over the match. The Mac had like these New Year's Eve glasses with like the year on them. Yeah. And Max goes to the Mac, "Hey, I have a pair just like that." And then Hersey just gets like all pissed off and then like starts like giving shit to Max, talking about fighting him, and Max like is like, "Oh yeah, bring it on," or whatever, like thinking that he's just doing like work talk, just like, messing around. And then Max goes, "Wait, are you serious?" And he goes, and Hersey was like, "Yeah, fucking right, I'm serious." And then like Max had to like kind of like tell him, like, he's like, "Oh, okay, like I don't know what you're getting mad about, but if you're serious about this, like, and you come at me, I'm gonna kick your ass," or something like that. Like, I had no clue what was going on or why Hersey was mad. And it turns out he just thought Max was mocking the kid or whatever, and he was getting off.
Yeah, that would be. So I until you told me about that years later, I didn't know a thing about it. And just knowing Heresy like I do, that would be my gut feeling, is that he thought that Max would have been mocking Keith, because Keith was, I think that might have been Keith's second match or something like that.
Yeah, so it was just, it was such a awkward, awesome situation.
That's fantastic. I will say I love both of them dearly. Heresy really helped me out when I first started. Crockett was talking about EWA and everything, and he kind of put that belt on me there, which kind of gave me a little bit of notoriety. He was the first guy to kind of push me along, so. And
you worked with Sasha Banks there, right? Mercedes, right?
Yes, yeah. She was my valet. Look who turned out better. That sucks for me.
She didn't bring you along for the ride? What the hell?
No. Apparently not.
Huh.
I forgive her.
Well, it wasn't long after that. We were all together at a show at a baseball stadium. Brian, that was the night where you said to me, "Hey, we should try to talk to somebody at Chaotic about Sean Burke."
Yeah. Jesus, that it was like a really old like baseball stadium, like the wooden stands, right?
Yeah.
It was Pittsfield, Mass. Wasn't the main event on that show like Brutus Beefcake versus like the local Pittsfield hero in like a boxing match?
Yes.
Yes, it was.
That's the only other thing I remembered about that night. I remember Brian talking about you, Sean. I remember Brutus Beefcake getting hurt in like a boxing match.
Yeah. Yep.
Yes, the main evented with a boxing match against. It was a local Pittsfield guy.
Didn't, like Beefcake go to the hospital or something? Was there something weird like that?
Probably.
Yeah, he like broke an ankle or something or other like that. It was
there was
like
something weird.
Yeah.
I remember that guy, the guy that he boxed was like, he was going around doing those celebrity boxing matches. So like, I think he boxed Canseco, probably like Screech or something like that. And he was a really nice guy, but occasionally he would, I remember it was like this celebrity boxing / wrestling thing, and they put him in some of the wrestling matches, and he just didn't get it. And I'll never forget. I think we were in Holyoke, and he was in a battle royal, and someone like kicked him in the ribs, and he ended up going to the hospital. And I just remember him being like, "It's real, it's not fake, it's real."
It's a shoot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember at that time you bring up the celebrity boxing. I remember that time, like Dr. Heresy, who we were just talking about with the EWA, he was kind of mixed up in that whole celebrity boxing thing. And there was a show with, as you mentioned, that had Screech on it. Were you on one of those shows?
I was in a battle royal on a show that Dr. Heresy worked a wrestling match with Screech. It actually surprised. Like I don't think old Samuel Powers had any wrestling training, and Heresy got a very passable match out of him.
That's to his credit, I think. Yeah. Yeah, I remember there's like celebrity boxing and wasn't it Max and Mike Nice had a boxing match, Brian?
No, me and Max had a boxing match. And Mike Nice had to fight a legitimate boxer, and he'd get his ass kicked.
I got put in one of those. Say it was in like Marlboro or something like that. Again, I don't think I had an actual wrestling match yet. And I was in one of these celebrity boxing matches, and it was supposed to be a work. And the kid that I was boxing, I guess, was actually a shoot boxer. And he decided that I was too big for us to work, and he had to really try to fight me, which, sucked for me.
Yeah, I was around one of those shows, and I just got the feeling that the boxing people just didn't get the deal.
Yeah, it was. I remember those well. It was a very weird environment.
The one with me and Max, our referee, he was somebody. I don't know boxing at all, but he was like a world champion. And I go to talk out the finish with him, and he was baffled that we had a finish. He goes, "What do you mean a finish?" And I'm like, "Well, we're not really boxing. Like we're just we're putting on a show. We don't really box. We're wrestlers." And he got all pissed off and went and found like the promoter guy or whatever, and he was all offended about it.
Yeah, that was the exact same experience I had. And I took a fall for the kid. I was supposed to take a fall for the kid in the third round, but he pissed me off because he was like punching me. So I lasted until the fourth because I was actually trying to get him with one. Unfortunately, I'm not a trained boxer, so he kept ducking all my haymakers. But he told me afterward, he's like, "There was one of those you threw. If you caught me, I was going down." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's right, mother."
So you really showed him you lasted a full extra round.
Yeah, that's damn right. The promoter was getting real sketched out too. In between rounds, you're supposed to go down last round. I'm like, "It pissed me off."
So Brian, we kind of went way off track, but back to talking about getting Burke into Chaotic.
Yeah, what are you looking for here, Mike?
Let's talk about you saw something in Mr. Burke.
Yeah, he's tall. He's 6'2". He's 6'2", 240, Mike.
I'm 6'3", there, asshole.
On last week's episode, we talked about trying to make it in the WWE 6'2", 240 cookie cutter standard.
Yep.
The irony, Brian.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's the irony. What I railed against was exactly what I was looking for myself.
Yeah, because Brian, you had like a little hand in helping out, with booking with Chaotic at the time.
I would say I had more or less had influence at that point. But yeah, I think because of look and size, and then another big thing about Burke was his passion and his attitude.
Right.
He was a guy who was coachable, who wanted to learn, who was a very positive guy to be around. And aside from the physical talent and the physical look, I thought he would have been just a great addition to Chaotic in general.
Look at you being nice to me again. This is weird.
See how I had to push him though, Burke? I had to push him.
Oh yeah.
That's because I didn't want anybody to know. All this is harder to admit than anything I admitted last week on the podcast. Secretly, I love Sean Burke.
Oh, our tweets are gonna have to get nicer now. That sucks.
So you moved on and you became a part of Chaotic Wrestling and NECW, which are two of the most noteworthy promotions in Massachusetts. They're around the Boston area, so you got a lot of notoriety there. How did you feel going into, you were from Western Massachusetts, you started out with all those guys, and now you're in a new promotion with, not a lot of guys crossed over between the Western Mass and, on the East Coast of Massachusetts. How'd you feel going into that environment, Sean?
I was scared.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys know this or not, but, the Chaotic locker room always had a little bit of a stigma about it.
Mm-hmm.
What?
I've heard that. So, yeah, my certainly that first show that I did. So, yeah, I remember, Brian, you had contacted me and said, Tarzan was looking to bring in a big heel. And that's all you told me. And I remember the first show I did was a Breaking Point in Woburn. And when I showed up, it's funny, I had met Tarzan before, but I didn't realize that Tarzan Taylor I'd met Matt Spectro. So I didn't even know they were the same person. So I didn't even know who I was, you were like, Tarzan's looking for, I had no idea who you were talking about. And I remember I had Antonio Thomas in the car with me. He rode up with me and he's like, Tarzan? I'm like, I don't think so. I have no idea. Then when I get there and he starts talking to me, I'm like, oh. And so I still had no idea what to expect. I figured I was just going to come up and do a job for somebody. And he looks at me within 10 minutes of being there and he's like, yeah, you're going to win tonight. And I want to have you go on this massive winning streak. And I'm like, okay, sure.
That works.
I'm in. I'm not going to complain.
Yeah, so you got the Chaotic title at one point. You had the NECW title too at one point, right?
I had them at the same time. I don't
Whoa.
know. Yeah, I don't know that. Has anybody ever done? Am I the only one that had them at the exact same time?
That's something. Yeah, I don't think that's happened. We'll just say it hasn't happened. We'll say you're the first and only.
Cool. Sweet.
That's what we do with things. We don't do the research. We just proclaim things.
That's fine. That's how I live my life. Just kind of proclaim shit.
There you go. Speaking of new environments, new locker rooms, you found yourself having the opportunity to go to Chikara to join the Devastation Corporation. How did this all come about?
So everything that they do there is trios based. So it's always, even, if you got a team, it's almost always three guys. So Joey Eastman and Sebastian Reese had gone there. Joey, obviously, as Sidney Bacabella, and Sebastian Reese as Max Smashmaster. They were there with the guy that ended up becoming my partner as a gatekeeper and Evolve later on, Blaster McMassive. Wonderful names, by the way.
Yes.
So they were there for, I think, about 6 months, maybe somewhere between 6 months and a year. And Joey called me or texted me. I don't think anybody actually calls anybody anymore.
No.
But Joey texted me and said, hey, are you interested in coming into Chikara? And, at the time I said, yeah, what the hell? Back then it had, I think, at least a better reputation. Not trying to bury anything, but I think it had a much better reputation than it does now. And I thought it was a good opportunity for exposure and everything. And I knew they were doing the Demolition, Road Warriors kind of ripoff thing, which I always thought was cool. I used to think when I was a kid, if the Legion of Doom didn't exist, that would have been the gimmick I would have come up with. That's what I've always told myself because I'm that good. But, so I liked the idea and everything. I said, yeah, what the hell? And that's kind of how we did it. The thing that was weird where I started there was I had just broken my ankle back here. So I was supposed to debut there. And then I didn't do it because obviously I couldn't wrestle. So I was out for about 6 months and Quackenbush had me coming in and doing I'd walk out with a mask on and just stand there ominously and then walk back. And for literally, I think 3 or 4 months, it was miserable because it's I'm driving to Pennsylvania every other weekend to literally walk out the curtain and stand there like a jackass and then walk back in. I remember WrestleCon, the year that Mania was in New Jersey, was the first time I ever took the mask off and you could just see my painted face underneath it. And I was excited. I was kind of healthy at that point and I thought I was going to wrestle. And then I got there and it's no, you're just walking out the curtain. And oh, sweet. Awesome.
But we're going to let you take the mask off.
Yeah, but you can take the mask off for the first time. So, okay, that's great. That was worth the drive.
So how long after that was the King of Trios 2014?
Ooh. So So I was probably there for about 6 months when we won King of Trios, actually wrestling, because I remember I broke the ankle in December of 2012. So we won King of Trios, and was it 2014? I don't even remember what year it was.
I think so, yeah. Because when yeah, I did some research. I'll admit that much. I think when you first started, that was when Chikara was shut down, and they had the wrestling is fun, wrestling is art, that whole thing.
Yes, So along with that, and I think if you talk to any of my partners, they would concur. So my first match, that's exactly what it was. My first match there was that show where they did the whole shutdown thing, and the wrestling is whatever shows all over America were not fun, to say the least.
Even though it said wrestling is fun. Come on.
Yeah, it was a lie.
Oh, no.
Wrestling was not fun. I had other names for them that I won't say in the podcast, but because they're all really offensive and not politically correct in any way, shape, or form, and I'll get a weird reputation. But it was you were traveling everywhere, which I'm a huge person on paying your dues and everything, but I was away like every weekend in like New Jersey or Pennsylvania or wherever else, taking 4-hour drives all the time, and we'd be performing on these little tiny shows in front of like sometimes 10 people, and it was just kind of like, man, like I thought this Chikara company had this really good reputation, and you had Cesaro and people like that had come through there, and then it's like, what is this? I could have done this back home, and I don't know, and I didn't know if I was getting any better from it or anything like that, and that at that time was really, am I getting better? And I didn't feel like I was, so I was very, very miserable. And I don't think they felt like I was committed to it, which, I really wasn't at that time. So when we went into King of Trios that year, I did not expect that we were going to win that. That was, no one told us. We didn't know until actually probably about 20 minutes before the match. He keeps that stuff very secretive. So it was that was quite shocking to me. Probably shouldn't have been, because Joey and Smashmaster had been very, very loyal to him and everything, and so it probably shouldn't have surprised me. But I think I was kind of riding their coattails on that a little bit.
Yeah, the whole period for Chikara was a little weird. The whole voluntary shutdown, and then all these little promotions are popping up all over the place. What was that? About a year's time that took place?
Yeah, just about. It was probably like 10 months or something like that. It was an interesting idea. I don't think it worked at all, and it is what it is. But yeah, it was a very weird time. It was kind of like, it felt like I was going to be getting all this exposure, and that's kind of why I was doing it. And then it kind of immediately was like, maybe not. Having said that, I don't think without doing that character, and without, not necessarily without that year, but without being in Chikara for as long as I was, I don't think I ever would have had the opportunity to do the stuff with Evolve. That's kind of what, Drew Gulak knew us from there, and Gabe knew who we were from there, and that's really what helped us get to Evolve. So I'll always be grateful for it, but there was definitely some times there where I was less than motivated and less than committed.
Right, and we'll get to Evolve in just a second, but I just wanted to ask, what was it like to work for Mike Quackenbush? What was that experience like?
Interesting. He's meticulous about everything that he does, to an extent that sometimes I feel that he can get in his own way at times.
Yeah.
But at the same time, extremely creative. It's just, the whole product is very much a niche thing. I think that's quite obvious, and it's not necessarily probably for everybody. And I just think that's how he's a huge fan of like 1993 WWF. And I think that kind of reflects itself in the product, and I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing. I love that kind of stuff too. But some of the stuff, I remember one of my early matches there, a guy held up a stop sign and I had to freeze because there was a stop sign, and it kind of, it kind of,
my God.
Yeah. And I'm all for, like, I'm a big Hulk Hogan fan. I was always a big Undertaker fan. So I'm big on the pageantry of wrestling and the over the top personalities and everything. But the stop sign thing was one of those things where I'm like, what am I doing?
I would have taken it a step further before the match. I would have been like, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, and then I didn't think, I probably would now, but at the time I didn't, I certainly didn't think I was in a position to do that. But I'm like, oh man, and meanwhile, I'm being trained by Antonio Thomas, and he's really big on realism. in what you're doing and in your, in mat wrestling and all that kind of stuff. And I was just in a world that I wasn't really comfortable in.
Different flavors of ice cream.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Different flavors.
It's just a different. I think Chikara is just a different thing altogether. It's something different than what traditional professional wrestling is intentionally.
It's definitely intentional. And it's definitely got its place. But I'd be lying if I said that it was what I always wanted to be doing. But at the same time, I do think it opened some doors for me. So I'll always be grateful for that part of it.
So, yeah, let's talk about that. You said it was Drew Gulak who saw you in Chikara and kind of gave you the in to evolve?
Yeah, well, so it was not even kind of that. What it was Smash Master had kind of gone away for a little while, and it was just me and Blaster McMassive teaming by ourselves, and Eastman had kind of gone away for a little while too. And we were kind of, at that point where we were doing pretty well as a team, and I think we were getting our names out there as Devastation Corporation, and obviously we wanted to, take it a step further. So we went to one of Gabe's Evolve tryouts and had a match with each other, which I actually thought was horrible. I didn't think it went very well at all. We kind of beat the shit out of each other. And so Gulak was running it, and Tracy Williams was there running it, and they both knew us from, involvement they had with Chikara. And they both really, at least Gulak told us he really, really liked it. And, I guess Gabe did as well. So an opportunity came up about 2 months later. We got an email from Gabe saying, hey, I need a tag team down in Maryland. Can you guys come down? So obviously, we did that. We went down and did Devastation Corporation down there and worked with the Bravado brothers and had what I thought was a pretty good little match there. And then we just kept showing up and helping out, which, at that point, so I had probably been wrestling. My career ended up being 7 years, so probably about 6 years at that point. And that was kind of back to setting up chairs and stuff, which was a little bit of a pride hit in a sense, but it kind of showed Gabe that we really wanted it. And then he had an opportunity come up where he had an idea for us, and we were fresh in his mind because we were always there. And he sent us an email and said, I got an idea for you guys if you want to do it. And that became the Gatekeepers.
Now, this might be a weird question, but I know Mike Quackenbush comes up with, if not all, most of the gimmicks for Chikara. And I think Devastation Corporation was his thing. Was there heat there because you took that gimmick kind of down there for Evolve?
Nope, not that I know of. Not that anyone ever told me. It was the Devastation Corporation definitely was his idea. It was his brainchild. I think the names were actually all, Joey on the names. Rumblecrunch and all. Yeah, I think that was all him. I'm not entirely sure. I know he gave me my name. I don't know if he came up with the other two. But no, there was no, I don't think there was any heat or anything, but it was the Devastation Corporation thing, I think, had just kind of run its course at Chikara. And I think, Mike kind of wanted to go in a different direction. So it was right around that same time. So I think it may have, because there was some kind of weird heat there, but I don't think there was.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure how that worked. So now you're starting with Evolve. How was it working for Gabe Sapolsky?
Honestly, wonderful. I'm not just saying that because it's a big promotion. I've never seen a promoter that, I guess, invests himself so much in his talent. And he invests not only in, what you're doing in the ring, but he really kind of invests in you as a person. And, in some of my conversations with him over the last couple of weeks about leaving and everything, he's kind of talked about, why he liked us and, how, us kind of sucking it up and helping out and stuff like that and going around really impressed him. And, that's why he thought of us when he came up with the Gatekeeper idea. And so he really kind of, in my opinion, really invested in the person, even beyond what you can do in the ring. I mean, obviously, you see the people that he's bringing in there. What you do in the ring is incredibly important to him as well. But just, I'm so thankful for the short time I had there. It ended up only being probably about 6 months or so. But it's a fantastic promoter to work for. If anybody has the chance to, I'd say jump at that.
So were you there before the whole loose association with the WWE came up?
No, we were there, I believe. No, actually, no, I'm just thinking back. I remember reading articles on WWE.com about Evolve shows well before we were there. So
okay.
It had started before we got there.
Okay, so once you got there, and I know Triple H was at one of the shows. I don't know if it was WrestleMania weekend or what, but he was at one of the shows. I know Regal's been to some of the shows. How is the atmosphere backstage with those guys kind of hanging around and watching you?
So I wasn't there when Triple H was there. That was before us.
Okay.
But I will say, Regal was at a number of the shows we were on, and I think you guys have both had interactions with him. He's so easygoing and calm that surprisingly, it's not like, oh my God, Regal's back there and he can make some decisions on my future. It's just more like, I want to talk to this guy and get his opinion on wrestling and stuff like that, So that's always been very relaxed when he's been there. This past WrestleMania weekend, Canyon Seaman was there. That was a little bit weird. So what ended up being my last match, I remember looking back at the entranceway and seeing him standing there and kind of, you're kind of turning your head. Is he reacting? Is he liking this? Is he looking? You're kind of doing that. But so that was a little bit more nerve wracking, I think, with him there, in all honesty, than Regal. And I think probably I don't know, maybe a different perspective I have on the two of them.
You said it was WrestleMania weekend when you got that last concussion, right?
Yep.
So you did one more match after that?
No. So there was 3 nights of shows. The first night we had a match. The second night we didn't have a match. We were out there with Ethan Page. He and Darby Allin had just like an ECW style crazy tables stuff going on, and Darby Allin jumped off the balcony in a trash can on top of us and stuff like that. So it was crazy. If you're into that kind of wrestling, I'd suggest trying to find a way to watch that. But just during the course of the match, there was just a spot we did where we ended up all catching a dive, and I caught a boot, just happenstance, caught a boot right off the top of the head, and I knew I was kind of messed up when it happened, but I didn't think it was that bad. And went through I think there was about 5 more minutes left in the match, and we had one more spot we had to kind of run in on, and I was fine. And then when I got to the back, it's when my vision started to go, and that's when I kind of panicked a little bit.
Yeah, of course. So were you ever close to saying, I can do this, I can get back to the ring, or was it kind of always out of the question?
So it's weird. So when it happened, so the next night we were supposed to have a tag match, and obviously that got pulled. And I remember talking to Gabe the night that I got the concussion. I kind of wanted to work the next night, and he's like, "No, you're not gonna tomorrow. You're gonna sit that one out."
Yeah.
But at that point, until I got home, I knew I was gonna go talk to some doctors because I knew this had been what I thought was a lot of diagnosed concussions in the last couple of years, but I didn't really have any inkling that was going to be it for me until I talked to 3 doctors. I talked to the first one, it was kind of it was that kind of advice. Then I talked to the second one, it was the same advice, and I talked to the third one, and at that point was where it was like, wow, I think crap, I think this is it. And it's weird. I'm going to be honest with you, it doesn't feel right now. I don't if this had happened to me 2 years ago, when I really I went through a period about 2 years ago where I felt like I was very stagnant and didn't feel like I was going anywhere or anything like that. And if this had happened then, I think I would have just walked away at peace and kind of, said, okay, that was it, on to the next thing. This timing kind of sucks. I felt like we were doing something really good there at Evolve. I really liked the Gatekeepers thing and liked working with Ethan Page. And I thought we had something pretty good, and I was really kind of excited for where it was going to go. So I don't feel done, in all honesty. And that's what's weird. I think I've officially said I am. But even in the back of my mind now, it's like, what if I go talk to another doctor in 6 months and they tell me, no, actually, you may have made a bad choice. You might be okay to go back. And that's the thing with concussions. No one really knows enough about them. My biggest fear is I hope I haven't jumped the gun and made a decision that I'm gonna regret. And I don't know.
I don't think you play around with this type of, in my personal opinion, I don't think you play around with this type of stuff, especially with a family, especially with wanting to I'm sure like most of us, man, you got dreams of coaching your kid in ball and being able to play in the backyard, and at the end of the day, it's just not worth it. It's not worth it at the level we're at. It's not worth it at the next level.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thought process, right? It's like, even if I were to make it, is it worth sacrificing my brain function for? No. The question mark is really, do I know I would be or not? And that's where it sucks. And that's with all the concussion research and stuff. It's, they can't really do anything and look at your brain that well until you're dead. And obviously in wrestling, Chris Benoit is kind of a cautionary tale. You don't want to get there, but at the same time, I'm always going to have that question mark. Would I have gotten, would my head have gotten that bad if I got another concussion or got 2 more concussions, or would I have still been fine? I'll never know.
Yeah, it's just if something is you're not leaving on your own terms. Something was, you feel like something was taken away from you. I definitely understand that thinking, but I mean, and I know it's obviously still fresh, and you're still, of the mindset of missing the in-ring, but kind of what does the future hold for you there? Do you think you'll ever get into training guys? Do you think you'll ever get into promoting or booking? Or, I mean, are you going to be a part of the wrestling business, or you just think you need to remove yourself from it?
So I think right now it's kind of, I want to be away from it just because it's kind of painful to be around it. I say that as I'm sitting in my basement next to a cabinet full of Hasbro figures, because I'm a nerd. But yeah, I think for a little while at least I want to get away from it and just kind of see what that feels like. But over the last couple of days, just kind of like the messages I've gotten from people and the people that have reached out to me and stuff like that, I realize that I actually am probably going to miss the people a lot more than I thought I would. For me, it's always been single focus. It's the in-ring performance, and it's starting to set in that I've actually made some pretty good friends. Some people that, some people I talked to at the last Evolve show that I'll probably never see again. It's kind of weird. That's actually kind of a weird feeling when that starts to set in. So, I don't know. I definitely, I've had some opportunities to hang on in kind of a managerial role, which right now I didn't want to do. I've had some conversations with some other people about, maybe helping out in other ways, maybe doing commentary. I've actually always been very interested in doing commentary, and I've never really had much of an opportunity to do it. So I don't really have any kind of body of work I can kind of put out there and show people, but I could see myself coming back and doing that for a little while maybe. But on the other end, I really want to get into coaching football. Actually, that's kind of where my head initially, when I made the decision that I was done, my first thought was kind of going to my local high school, walking into the coach's office and saying, hey, I have no experience other than my playing career, and I've forgotten most of the stuff that I used to know, but do you need any help?
That's a good way to start. That's kind of what happened with you with Evolve. You just kind of walked in, started setting up chairs, and I'll do anything.
I think there's surprisingly, I know people say it all the time. They talk about that kind of stuff. And sometimes I think it seems kind of cliche, but I think sometimes you just got to go put yourself out there, and sometimes it works,
Yeah. Well, you're always like, a great guy to have in the locker room and stuff like that. I know Brian agrees with me begrudgingly. I'm sure he agrees with me.
No, not begrudgingly at all. I am, as much as I love burying you to your face and on Twitter.
he's just upset that I'm pretty sure I've got the win-loss on you. I think you've only beaten me once, maybe twice.
To be fair, though, you did have to lose to Mark Sherman immediately after one of them. So.
Oh God, remember that night? Oh man, that may have been the biggest reaction I've been involved in the history of my wrestling career, and it was not about me at all.
Well, that's because he sold tickets to all his friends and told them he was winning the championship. So
I will refrain from commenting because I can't confirm that.
I can confirm that.
Well, you wrestled Mark Sherman in a 3-minute match, and you also got to wrestle Kevin Nash. So
look at you guys. Malonis put you up to that, didn't he?
No.
Okay. Yes, I did. That was that'll forever be something that I remember simply because my kind of pantheon of wrestling, of heroes in wrestling was it was always Hulk Hogan, The Undertaker, Bret Hart, and Diesel. So, obviously I wasn't ever going to have the chance to work with Bret Hart, wasn't going to have the chance to work with The Undertaker, and certainly at this point, I don't see Hogan doing independent shows. So, that was the only guy that was possible, at least at that time, that I was going to have an opportunity to work with. And it was from like day one, I knew he was around doing independent shows. And I used to tell Heresy, I used to say, hey, can you book Kevin Nash? Can I work with Nash? And he, yes, sure, if you want to pay the booking fee, because from what I understand, it's not small. So that was always kind of a thing for me. And Steve Perkins at Big Time, I think, knew that because I would always joke around about it. And he, there was an opportunity to put me in there with him. And I think he tipped Nash off to the fact that I was kind of a Kevin Nash mark before the match. And I remember vividly going in there to talk to him. And, obviously, I think we had like a 5 or 6 minute match. But I remember, it was kind of just like, oh, I'll get you with the choke slam. And I'm like, okay, all right, that's what we'll do. And I didn't know if he was going to bump for me. I didn't know what he wanted to do, really. And we went out there and hit me, with his knees and stuff in the corner and his big elbow and everything, and gave me the crotch chop. And had me pop him, and was always very light and very safe, and especially like with a guy like that, I'm really not gonna try to lay anything in to kill him. And,
well, you can tell Sean Burke never wrestled himself.
Nah. Everybody always told me the only thing people ever told me was a little bit tight was that rope walk shoulder tackle. Handsome used to tell me that kind of shoot would take you down. Like you had no choice of bumping on that. But, yeah, we got in, and I guess I think he was impressed by the fact that I didn't stiff him, and he started bumping for me, which kind of on the fly just kind of shocked me. And after the match, came back, he was very talkative with me, and hey, we're gonna do this again tomorrow night, right? And he was all excited, and then worked with him the second night, and he asked me what I wanted to do, and he allowed me to give him all of his shit in the corner, which was for me was kind of cool, giving Kevin Nash all of his elbows and stuff. Then I had him turn around on me, which got a pop, which also made me very happy, and sent me a tweet afterward, and made me feel very good. As the tiny wrestling fan in me, the 10-year-old wrestling fan in me was on cloud 9 that weekend.
And this is like 2015, right? This wasn't all that long ago.
No, and actually, I had for the longest time, I thought that I had his last match because his shoulder. I remember his shoulder was really bothering him, and he was going to have shoulder surgery shortly thereafter. And then he didn't work any matches for almost a year, and then recently, I think within the last 3 or 4 months, he worked a match in Poughkeepsie against the Brooklyn Brawler. And I was actually kind of pissed. I was like, damn it, I didn't have his retirement match. And I thought I did. I still had like 3 or 4 more matches after we worked anyway that I didn't know about. So
you got to save that kind of stuff for the Brooklyn Brawler.
Yeah, I mean, obviously.
Well, I mean, I wanted to have you on before this whole thing happened with you leaving wrestling, but I'm glad we were able to do it now, and really appreciate you coming on the Wrestling Podcast About Nothing, Sean.
Well, thank you guys. I've wanted to come on for a while, but I was not going to ask Brian and give him that satisfaction.
And I made him ask you, so you're welcome.
I'm a big fan. It's secret. And now it's not a secret. The whole world, like the people that listen to this podcast know, and I hope you know how much I thank you, Burke. When I was booking, you were one of the guys that was just an absolute pleasure to work with in the ring, and then work with out of the ring as well. In a booking sense, you never were a headache, up for anything. Always coachable. Always a guy who listened, and a guy who I also was, more than happy to stick my neck out for on a couple of different occasions. So I
appreciate that. I'm not just saying it because you're on the phone, but I always tell everybody when they ask me who some of my favorite, guys to work with were, I do always say you, for the sheer fact that like I always felt like you're one of the first guys that I felt like I could get in the ring with and literally not call anything, and we could still go out there and have a pretty good match. I remember that match in Littleton when you broke your ass.
Yes.
And we may or may not have broken a wooden door, possibly, maybe not.
Wait, how did you break your ass?
I on the fly called miss like the earthquake spot on the outside of the ring.
Smart.
And it was the dumbest thing of all time.
He sends me a text message like 2 days later, and he's like, "My ass is still killing me. It hurts to sit down." Well, we called nothing. I remember like 5 minutes before the match, you look at me and you're like, "Well, we've got to finish. We don't really have anything else." And I'm like, and I was excited to do that at that point actually, because that was right before Handsome and I were going down to Orlando, and I knew we were going to get put in those spots to just get out there and work without calling anything. So I was really happy to work with you that night. And I think I said it to you at the time. I'm like, would you mind going in there and just working this on the fly? Because I just want to make sure I'm up to speed and can do it,
Oh, we didn't even talk about the Orlando thing.
That's okay. We don't need to talk about that because I'm still sitting in my basement.
Well, next time you're on the podcast,
yes,
we'll talk about coaching Pop Warner football, and we'll talk about you in Orlando.
Cool, and I can when Brian and I can have fights about the Steelers and the Dolphins.
Oh my God!
We'll play second fiddle to a team that shall not be named on this podcast.
Yeah. You're Crockett. You're a local fan, right?
Well, I mean,
the next football game Crockett watches will be the first football game he watches.
Okay.
I watched the Super Bowl.
What? Just so you could bust people's chops?
Well, yeah. Some material for the podcast, Brian. All right. Well, thank you very much, Sean Burke. Really a pleasure to have you on the podcast. And good luck in everything that's going on in your life. I mean, you got plenty going on, and really appreciate you coming on.
You know what you should have said?
What's that?
We wish you well in all of your future endeavors.
Oh, it's a perfect way to go out. I always wanted to be future endeavored. I wanted it to be because I got signed first and then got future endeavored, but whatever. I'll take your future endeavor.
Well, thanks very much, Sean.
Thanks, guys. We'll see ya.
Okay, we want your feedback. Every week, we do something called Merv Griffin Time, a talkback segment where we interact with you, the listener. So tweet us at the WPAN on Twitter with your take on this week's episode, your thoughts on our interview with Sean Burke, Flex Rumblecrunch, and use the hashtag WPAN. We'll mention you and your tweets this Thursday.
Hey, now that Burke's off the air with us here, can I go back to trashing him?
Well, I think you did quite well during the interview. Yeah, you showed a softer side, Brian, for a few minutes there. So that's congratulations on that.